welcome to my talk. This talk is titled A Tale from an Iron Crib to a Pro-Life Witness on the Sidewalk. I'll just start off with just telling a little bit about myself. My name is Michael. I was born 1988 from a big town called Bucharest, Romania. But before I was born, my father didn't believe that I was from him, so he rejected me from birth. Even before birth, he rejected me. He wanted me out of the picture. He wanted to get rid of me because he didn't believe that I was from him. So my mother said, no, I'm going to give birth to him and place him up for adoption. And because of that, that's how my father divorced my mom, and they walked out. My mom at the time had another brother. He was older than I, and so my mom just couldn't afford to keep me at the time, so she did a loving thing. She placed me up for an adoption. So then when I was born in the hospital, I was immediately taken from the hospital in Bucharest, Romania, to an iron crib, to an orphanage. Now at the time we were under a very communist leader called Ceausescu, and he basically overflowed all these orphanages with all these kids. Because of the lack of population in the orphanages, Ceausescu wanted to populate the country, and at that time it was illegal to have contraception or an abortion unless you have 4 kids, and you can start using contraception, but unless you have 4 kids, you're not allowed to use contraceptions or abortion. So then this left families to place these kids up for adoption because they couldn't afford to feed them or to take care of them. And so a lot of these families lived in very small huts, and they would not be able to fit 4 kids in there. So the orphanages were filled to the top. And my particular orphanage that I was in, my orphanage that I was in had 70 to 75 orphans in this orphanage. Now, because of my race and my nationality, I also was part gypsy. And at the time, Romanians were particularly kind of racist against gypsies. So because of that, I was placed in the way back of the orphanage, and and also too, the orphanages were very understaffed, and they did not have a lot of helpers. So a lot of times we were left in these iron cribs there with no one to come and play with us, hold us, or do anything. We would just sit in these cribs, rock back and forth, and stare at our noses. But for the people who were more up in the front, they had a better chance of getting adopted because they were able to be held, to be played with, and to be stimulated. But not all of them were able to do that because of the poor quality of the orphanage and the rundown buildings. These orphanages were infested with AIDS, animals, bugs, you name it, it's there. And so because of that, a lot of kids there had AIDS in the orphanages. Now me, I was also one of the iron crib babies at that time. In 1988, I was placed in the orphanage for the first 3.5 years of my life. I was placed in the way back of the orphanage because of my gypsy races, because of my nationality of being a gypsy. Due to the fact of that, I was never taken out of the crib, I was never held, never played with a toy, nothing. I was the last person one of the last people to get the attention, and 90% of the time we would not even make it back there because of the lack of the staff that they have and the lack of the facilities and so forth. And also we were nutritiously neglected as well. I watched the YouTube video of the feeding kids in the iron crib from 2020, and I would see them taking 3 scoops, putting it in their mouth, and then move on to the next child. We were fed twice a day in those orphanages. 3 scoops of food in our mouth per meal. So you're looking at about 6 scoops of food in your mouth a day. Regular teaspoon. Now, because of that, back in Minnesota for my future family, my aunt, who is my mom's sister who would adopt me, she saw this new series called 2020. And on there, they did an interview with all these iron crib babies, these orphanages in Romania, and these kids that were confined to their cribs and not allowed to be taken out or to play with or even be held. And so my aunt saw that and her heart went out. So she joined this organization called Eastern Children European Foundation, and she went to Romania and she packed a lot of clothes, toys, and all sorts of stuff to play or to bring to the orphans so that they can help. And a lot of volunteers would fly in there too from Eastern Children European Foundation so they can help pick up the slack of the staff because of the lack of the staff they can hire. So because of that, a lot more kids were able to come out. But this was until 3 years after this has happened. Now, because of the side effects of this, because I was never held or played or even taken out of the crib, my aunt said that this is for the first time is when I was actually held and taken out of the crib for some of these kids, including me. And so she took me out of the crib. I could not walk. I could not even look at her because I was never taught how to look at someone. I could never play with a toy. I was not ever taught to do anything. So I would when she would take me out to go into the toy room, I would sit back in a corner and just rock back and forth and make these squeegee noises, and play with my hands, because my hands became to be my toys, because that's all I had to play with in the crib. So then my aunt knew that she had to work with me because families were passing me up day by day saying, we can't take this child, he doesn't know how to play the toy, what's wrong with this child, he's like profoundly mentally challenged. So then my aunt who worked with me, she started taking toys, putting it in my hands, and she was trying to get me to sit on her lap and to play with the toy, but I just couldn't do it. But it wasn't until one day, so when I would take a toy at that time, I would take a toy, crawl around the orphanage. They would call me the hooligan because I would take the toy, start bopping it on people's heads, and little kids' heads, and they'd be like, okay, get him back in the crib. But my aunt, she sat down with me, she taught me how to play with the toy, she taught me how to look at her, to make contact, and to how to walk. But she had a real tough time doing it because I just couldn't do it, I just couldn't get it, my brain couldn't process. Now, scientists and doctors say at the age of 3, you should be able to walk, you should be able to do motor skills, you should begin to start going to daycare, doing the blocks and all that fun stuff. But because I wasn't able to do that for the first 2 years of my life, that's how my brain became because this whole part of my brain, my frontal lobe, never developed because of the brain injury that I have from sitting in the iron crib in the orphanage all day long. So then, but it wasn't until one day, my aunt, when I was out of the crib, I picked up a toy, crawled over to her, sat in her lap, and started playing with the toy. So she knew that she was making progress, and she knew that I may have a chance. And also, as a reminder to let you know, they say at the age of 3, if you are not toilet trained, or you can't walk, or you can't play with the toy, or any of that stuff, they will mark on your file mentally retarded, and then you would be immediately sentenced into an asylum at the age of 3 if you don't meet a certain criteria, whether it's toilet trained, walking, or even to communicate. Then they mark on your file as retarded, and they automatically will, the state will send you to an asylum, and basically that's the last place where you go, because once you're in there, they basically neglect. There's more neglection and abuse. They just put water in there, and they don't feed you very much in there, and basically you just die because of the conditions. So then my aunt knew that she had to do something because my time was coming up, and so my aunt, she flew back home because it's Christmas, and she showed my mom. She talked to my mom about adopting some of these kids out of here, and my mom at the time was praying. My dad, they were contemplating an adoption, and so then they did, and then my aunt said, well, here's some pictures. So they laid up all the pictures of all the kids that were in my particular orphanage, about 75 pictures. And out of all of them, she said, who's this one? And my aunt said, oh, that's the little hooligan, the little troublemaker down there. He goes around and bops people on the head, but he needs to be adopted because he's coming pretty close to be sent into an asylum, and basically that's the last place where they go. And so then my mom said, you want that one. Another reason why my mom said that she wants me, because sometimes I always ask her, I say, so Mom, so what's kind of a funny reason why you adopted me? And she said, well, because you look Italian, and your eyebrows are big, and you look Italian. So I wanted a little Italian boy. So then she went over. At the time, my mom, she had a baby girl. Her name was Jacinta, and so she flew to Romania with my little sister, my new sister, soon to be my sister. And so she flew to Romania, and then they found me, and then they went to the courts and everything. But there was a problem. The court said in order for me to be adopted, the paperwork would have to be signed by my birth mom, and so we had a really hard time finding her. We couldn't find her. We didn't know where she was. So then they were running out of time. So then my aunt ran into someone and said, well, we know your mom and his mom is, and we can help you out. So they went and they helped her out, and so they got into this car with this translator, my mom and my new sister, and they were driving down this muddy road. It was pouring rain, into a back road where there was a sewing factory. We went into the sewing factory, and long and behold, there was my mother. She worked there. She signed the paperwork and said that he's yours. And so then I was permitted to go home, get the passport, and come on home and live in the great land of the United States of America. it was hard for me to grow up. I struggled with my academics. I struggled with living skills. I struggled with eating food because I was fed much, basically, and it was just hard for me to eat solid food. But eventually I got the hang of it, and it was a lot of work. Kind of retrained me into living, into growing up and trying to get this new stage into me and education and stuff. But by the grace of God, I was able to manage, and it was also tough because I had a tough time with my social skills, my social issues, communicating with people, and sometimes I may say something that may not be appropriate, and all that kind of stuff. And so I never really had a lot of friends growing up, but thankfully I found some friends through my mom and through other friends, and so. But anyways, that's kind of what happened growing up. Now, a little bit how I got into the pro-life movement was I was in church one day, homeschool group, 7th grade, and I just said to myself, I said, God, what do you want me to do? You saved me from a severe death in Romania. What can I do to repay you back? And I could just hear this voice in my heart saying, I want you to go out and save lives. I want you to be a Bible counselor and to preach the gospel of life. So I was thinking like, nice, great. Get to go stand out on the sidewalk in Minnesota weather. Nice. But I did it. And so I did it for a couple of years. But then I realized, I felt that nothing was happening. But it wasn't until one day, because my mom, when we would go to violin lessons, and we would go out to the abortion clinic after going to violin lessons. But it wasn't until one day I saw this one lady go into the abortion clinic, and her heart was torn, and I saw the anguish in her eyes that she did not want to do this. So then I went up to my mom, and I said, hey, my mom adopted me, my mommy loves me, she's like for your little baby, and it was just the Holy Spirit, and I was only 6 years old at the time. I was only 6 years old at the time. So then she came down and she said, I can't really do this with your little child here telling me that you were adopted. And so my mom explained the situation that I went through in Romania. And so then she said that she was going to keep her baby and so forth. So, it just seems that, we're called to do something for God. We're called to work for God. We're called to do something for God. But then we're kind of like, what do we need to do? And so that's how I was like. And that's when I got this answer that I want you to be a Bible counselor. So then, one day, I was out Bible counseling, and there was this gal who was Bible counselor. There was this gal who walked into the abortion clinic, and her name was Erica. And I told her my adoption story, and I said, please, you don't have to abort. You don't have to do this. My mother chose life for me. Please do the same. And she looked at me and she says, well, I have no other options. Can you guys help me? And I said, yes, we can. We took her across the street. She had an ultrasound. She had a baby boy. And he named him Elijah. And today, he is 8 years old today. And I'll just tell you another recent save that I was out there a couple months ago. I was praying instead of counseling, just asking God, saying, Lord, if it's your will that you at least save one baby today, just one. But if you save more, great, I'll take that. But I just asked for one. And so then this gentleman and his girlfriend came up, and I said, wait, don't go in there. Come on down and talk with me. I got something to show you here. So obviously the mother flies right in. Like, she doesn't want to have anything to do with me. But the man comes down and says, yes, what do you want to show me? I said, can I talk to you for a little while? Like, well, I got to wait for my friend in here. So then, like I said, the dad was willing to come out and speak to me. And I told him, I said, sir, if you be honest with me, let's just have a man-to-man talk for a minute. I said, sir, is your friend going in there for an abortion today? He says, yes. I said, don't you want to love that child? Don't you want to play baseball with your child someday? Why do you want to do this abortion? Do you know what it's going to cause to your soul? And do you know the great destruction of abortion? And he says, yeah, but, I think God will understand, because, it's just one little child. I mean, it's not like it's 30 or 20. And I was just like, whoa, back it up right there. So then I told him, I said, God cares about that child just as much as he cares for your soul, just as much as he cares for my soul. And I told him, and I said, if you were the only one here on earth, and God was still going to the cross just for you. So, and I told him, I said, I want to tell you a story about a boy who was on a beach one day, and he found all these starfishes washed up one night. And the shoreline was filled with thousands and thousands of these starfishes. And so the little boy started throwing them back into the ocean one by one. And so then the little boy said to the child, an elderly man came up to him and said, child, what are you doing? He says, I'm throwing the starfish back into the ocean. I'm trying to save them. And he bent down and says, child, the shore is filled with thousands of starfish. You will never get them back into the ocean in time before the tide comes up. So the little boy bent down and picked up the starfish, threw it into the ocean, and said it made a difference for that one. It made a difference for that starfish. And I told him, I said, that's how much God cares about your little child and you. Because you never know what that child is going to grow up to be. He could be the next president, Major League Baseball player, you name it. We just don't know, and we are not to take that from God. So then he asked me some questions, and he said that, well, I tried everything I can, but, she won't listen. So then I referred him to the Gospel of Matthew about Peter catching fish, and Jesus told him, said that you'll be catching fish, you'll be catching in faith, meaning that you'll be saving lives. You'll be bringing souls back to Christ. And I told him, just as St. Peter not doubted, but just as much as St. Peter told the Lord, but we have fished day and night and caught nothing. But if you ask of me to do this, I will do it. So he did, and then the boats were just loaded with fish to the point where they were sinking. So it's kind of like, I told him, I said, God will reward you for this, and he will bless you. Don't throw away your child. And so then I said, go back in there and talk to her, and she'll listen to you, because men have 90% of the influence of saving a life. And I told him, I said, we are called to be courageous. We are called to be heroes for Christ. We are called to defend the family. And right now, Satan is on your territory trying to mock you with his abortion. So be a hero for Christ and defend that little child. So then he went in there, and then 20 minutes later he came out with her. They drove off in the car saying, I gave them a little pamphlet, the healing pamphlet. I said, oh, well, they had the abortion. And I told them, and I said, if you've had an abortion, here you go. This will help you heal. And he said, no, we didn't have the abortion. We couldn't go through because you were out here and you answered every question I had. So therefore, I cannot let her go through this abortion. So we're going to keep our baby. And because of you being out here, you are the real hero. You are the hero for Christ. And I looked at him and I said, no, you are the hero for choosing life. God will reward you and you will be rewarded. So they drove off, and then about 9 months later, they called me and said that they had a baby boy, and they're naming him Samuel, after a ministry that I was working with called Project Samuel at the time. It's just, those stories, that's what really encouraged us to defend life. And that's what encouraged us to live out God's will. Another situation, a mother went in not knowing the consequences of an abortion. And I talked to the gentleman that was with her. I told him the same thing. Men have 90% of influence. And then he told me, he says, the reason why we're having this abortion is because we can't afford to get the child. She needs to finish her schooling, and it's just not time. And so I said, our time is not God's time. We can help you financially. Right across the street, people can help you financially. You just gotta look and ask questions, and we can help you. And then I told him about my adoption story. I told him that I was almost aborted, or I told him that I was almost killed 2 times. One possibly could have been an abortion through because my father rejected me, and through this asylum that I would have been put into. And so then he couldn't believe that, and he says, yeah, we'll walk across the street and we'll look at the alternatives. And then about 6 months later, I get a call from her saying that, or 5 months later, I get a call from her saying that they're going to have a baby girl. And so they said they're going to keep the baby, and you're still keeping in contact with her up to this day. And so those are just a few of the stories that I've shared of saving lives. You and I, we have a calling in life. We have a calling to defend the sanctity of human life, from natural conception to natural death. I was almost killed, but God saved me through my aunt, my adoptive aunt, my adoptive mom. God uses people in our lives to build His kingdom. He wants to use you. To all those who are watching this, He wants to use each and one of you here. Many are called to harvest the field of God, and many are called to defend life. So I ask of you, are you willing to go deep in your heart and search and find out what God is asking you? Just as I did, to ask God, say, what can I do to thank you? Look at this beautiful cross. Look what Jesus went through for you, for me, and for you. God had a choice. He could have said, I don't want to go through this. I don't want to do this. But God chose to go through this so that we can go to heaven. God chose me to go out onto the sidewalks and to counsel women out of abortion and to let them know that there is a healing, that there is a healing way of going through this, and that there are alternatives, loving alternatives. Just like my mom made the love an alternative to place me up for adoption. So I ask of you, if Jesus can go through the cross and death and mockery and ridicule by the public, then we...
Go ahead.
Okay, ready? Then through the power of Christ, we can go through our own passion. What if it's going out in an abortion clinic and praying? People driving by, going down, giving you the finger, the gesture, oh, go get a blanket job, go get a life, stuff like that. What do you think they've done to Jesus? And if we're being mocked by the escorts, employees, boyfriends, women, being yelled at, but that means God is using all of that, either A, to make us stronger, or B, to show us that we are getting through them. So don't be afraid. If you feel that God is asking you to talk to a loved one who might be thinking of an abortion, do it. Try to talk her out of it and give her the loving alternative. Just as my mom gave me the loving alternative. I want to take a moment of silence and listen. Do you hear the small stillness voice in your heart? Those are the unborn children asking for your help to come and stand out in front of an abortion clinic, to pray and to counsel. What if you're called out to just stand and pray? Great. That is just as powerful as talking to the women. So I ask of you, what is God calling you? Thank you. God bless you.